Today is the last round of the Sinquefield Cup and we have a few decisive games. In this one I will be going over Aronian versus Grischuk. Aronian plays d4 and we have a slightly unusual opening. Knight to f3, d6, g3 preparing bishop to g2, knight to b to d7, so sort of like a King's Indian structure for black. Bishop to g2, e5. Here you can also play g6 and bishop g7, but e5 is also fine. c4, we have c6, so usually when there is bishop fianchettoed on g2, c6 helps to block out the diagonal and also relieve some pressure off b7. And also it supports d5 in this position. We have knight to c3, e4, knight to h4, d5, castles, bishop to b4, pawn captures. Here f3 challenging the center. We have bishop captures, pawn captures, castles from black, and bishop to a3. So looking at the rook, and also bishop controls d6, so there might be some knight to f5, knight d6 in the future. We have rook to e8, moving out of the way, knight to f5, going for d6. Here knight to b6, eyeing c4, and also the knight on c4 controls d6. So knight to d6, and here Grischuk plays knight to c4, allowing Aronian to simply capture the rook. If Aronian captures the rook, simply queen captures back, and after the bishop moves, well, it's under fire here, so if it goes back, simply e3, and black, although down in an exchange, has decent compensation. White has the two bishops, but you can see these pawns on e3 and d5 sort of lock the bishop out. This position is actually totally playable for white, but Aronian decides not to go for it. So instead, after knight to c4, he captures the knight. We have d captures c4, f captures on e4, knight captures, and here queen to c2. So looking at this knight twice, and here if the knight retreats, let's say knight to f6, then e4 is nice for white. So claiming space in the center, and something like rook to e1 would follow, and white has a nice position. So instead of retreating, Grischuk plays queen to d5. He wants to keep his knight in the center. And in this position, Grischuk was actually under time pressure already, even though it's just move 17. In fact, he had, I believe, 15 minutes on the clock, while Aronian had about 36 minutes. So more than double the time for Aronian. And, well, this is actually quite common for Grischuk. He just loves time pressure. But here Aronian decides to go all out. He plays rook takes f7. And this clearly caught Grischuk by surprise, judging from his expression on the live stream. But after a few minutes of thought, he plays king takes f7 and rook to f1 from Aronian. And here if you retreat the king to g8, well, this allows bishop takes e4, and here white gets a huge initiative after something like queen to h5, guarding h7. Well, then simply rook to f4, followed by rook to h4, and white just has a massive attack. Here you can't really capture the bishop because, well, this allows a back rank checkmate for white. So here, the king retreat is not such a good move. But Grischuk plays the best defensive move, bishop to f5, and this allows g4, but after white wins the bishop, black is still up the exchange. And if he manages to hold on, then, well, he's going to be fine. g6 from Grischuk, so protecting the bishop so you can capture back with the pawn. We have queen to c1, eyeing h6, and here a very natural move from Grischuk, king to g7, just preventing queen to h6. But here rook to e6 is the best defensive move. because after, for example, if you capture, then after the pawn recaptures, well, then this allows black to gain initiative with rook to g6 and also rook to g8. And here, if instead you try queen to h6, threatening queen takes h7, simply king to g8. And after you take the piece, you can simply recapture with the pawn and the queen is under attack. And after the queen moves, the rook can come to g6. And well, it helps to shield the king and also with some pressure on the opposing king. And the rook can also come to f6 if needed to guard this pawn. So king to g7 here from Grischuk, and we have pawn captures the bishop, pawn captures f5, and here bishop captures, removing the knight, so maybe threatening queen g4, pawn captures the queen has to keep an eye on g5, and here queen to f4, we have h6 from black, so maybe with ideas of king to h7 and putting the rook on g8. Aronian plays queen to c7 check, we have king to h8, bishop to d6, going for bishop to e5, we have rook to g8 check, king to f2, so the king wants to come here, and it's quite safe on e3. We have rook to g6, an important position for the rook because it prevents rook to f6. Here bishop to e5 check, king to g8, and king to e3. And here a blunder actually from Grischuk, he plays rook to d8. Here rook to e8 was actually necessary to guard e7 because rook to d8 allows Aronian to play queen to e7, so guarding the square, which is important as you will see later why. And in this position black is just in Zugzwang. You can see this rook can't really move because it has to keep an eye on g7, otherwise you'll be checkmated. And also this queen is just tied down to the defense of this rook. It also has to keep an eye on f7, and there isn't much that black can do in this position. Here b5 from Grischuk, we have h4, so threatening h5, and well, there isn't really much that black can do to stop this. If he plays h5, well then simply rook to f5, and there's no way to stop rook takes h5 followed by rook to h8. So a completely hopeless position for Grischuk. He plays a5, but simply h5 from Aronian, and after rook moves, well then this allows the rook to f6. So the threat is simply rook captures on h6 followed by rook to h8 mate. Grischuk plays a rook captures on e5, but that allows a mate in 2. And after rook to g6 check, Grischuk resigned the game. The only move is king to h8, and you can see the purpose of queen to e7 earlier. It guards this square, so the king is forced to h8. And after h8, king to h8, well, queen to g7 is checkmate. So a very exciting game from both players. Aronian's rook takes f7 has clearly paid off. And you just got to love his style. He is so dangerous with the initiative. And after this game, Aronian currently joins Caruana in the lead. And also Magnus won his game against Nakamura. And that was a grind fest. The game ended in 97 moves. So Carlsen joins the lead as well. There are 3 players in the lead, and there will be a playoffs tomorrow to decide the winner. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you do, please subscribe for more future content. Thank you for watching and have a nice day.